live from the Matthews Brothers Studio.
And welcome back. I'm Corey Lewandowski filling in for Howie Carr, who is off today. Really appreciate you guys listening. We've had a great show today. And before we get to our final guest, someone who you know by both reputation, by his fight on television, and by his desire to really instill the values of America first, I want to disclose that Peter Navarro is a Harvard-educated PhD in economics. He is one of the smartest people who has worked and continues to work in the White House. I worked with Peter on the campaign when we were talking about the issue of China. This is something he's passionate about. And so I want to tell you that it is with great privilege and honor that I am inviting to the Howie Carr Show, and joining us on the line is Peter Navarro, who currently serves as the Director of the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy at the White House. He's an assistant to the President. He is the man who the President listens to as it comes to China and on the issue of trade abuses and making sure America's economic policies put the America worker first. Peter Navarro, welcome to the Howie Carr Show with Corey Lewandowski.
My brother Corey, man, this guy, Corey Lewandowski, smartest political analyst in the country. So you're blessed to have him sitting in for the cap.
Well, you know, Peter, it's so nice of you to say, but the work that you're doing every day in the White House is so important. I think it's the first time in a generation where we're fighting back against the unfair trade practices, the theft of intellectual property, where we have seen, and the Wall Street executives have complained about the short-term downturn for what I believe to be, Peter, a long-term gain. Tell the listeners what your role is inside the White House. Give us a sense of some of the meetings, without disclosing information you can't, that you're part of, what your team does, how focused you are, and how you got there.
Sure, Corey. My mission at the White House as the Director of the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy is to help President Donald J. Trump create good-paying manufacturing jobs for the men and women of this country that work with their hands. And I'm so blessed to be able to help this president do that. If you look at the statistics, we're doing great. This president's administration has created not just over 6 million jobs, but over 500,000 manufacturing jobs. And what's extraordinary about that, Corey, is that the previous administration, Barack Obama and Joe Biden, actually lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs. And as you know, during those long 8 years and even the time before that, the idea that we could continue manufacturing in this country was a fantasy to many people. In New England, where he broadcasted from, bore much of the brunt of the attack on our manufacturing base. What I do is many different things, but let's focus on China, because that's kind of the centerpiece of the loss of our manufacturing jobs.
It's the biggest threat, I think, Peter. China is the biggest threat, and you recognize it early. You've written about it many times. Tell us what you continue to do now on that threat, because I think the American worker should be very afraid of what China is doing.
So here's the big problem, and it dates back to China's entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001. That was an entry that was promoted by President Bill Clinton. It was endorsed by George W. Bush, and it was facilitated by Barack Obama and Joe Biden. And when China got into the World Trade Organization, they were basically allowed to take advantage of the international trade system while they broke all the rules. And what we saw in the 16 years after that was the loss of over 70,000 factories and over 5 million manufacturing jobs. And here's what China does. I call it the 7 deadly sins, or the 7 acts of economic aggression, which President Trump is demanding that China cease. The first thing is uniformed officers of the People's Liberation Army, as well as civilians of the Chinese government, on a routine, regular basis, minute by minute, hour by hour, every day, hack our business corporations in order to steal their trade secrets and their technology.
Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? They're hacking our secrets and stealing our technology. I mean, they're coming here to the U.S. under the guise of something else, and they're stealing it, or they're doing this from over in China, or both.
So here's a typical what they call an advanced persistent threat vector that the Department covered multiple times. You got a uniformed officer of the People's Liberation Army sitting in Shanghai in a building on a computer, hacking into an American corporation. So what they do is they hack in there using a spear phishing technique or some kind of Trojan or virus, whatever. Once they get in there, they sit there and they watch the traffic that goes over. They embed themselves in the corporation server, and they begin to extract all types of information. It can be something as simple as a blueprint. It can be the details of a negotiation that the company is undergoing so that this company can basically, in China, outbid the American company. In some cases, we've seen, and this will curl your hair, Corey. In some cases, we've seen they'll control things so much that they'll purposely cancel the orders that are coming in to the American company as a way of weakening that company. And then when the company's weak enough, they'll go in and try to buy it and take it into their orbit. Okay?
That's just
and
amazing.
By the way, as they're hacking our business computers, they're also trying to hack in to the people listening here. They're going after your personal data to collect information on your credit cards or whatever. So that's just one of the 7. It's just unbelievable that we would put up even with that, but it gets worse. The second one is the corporate America is so naive in a lot of ways. It's like they think that it's the yellow brick road going over to China because there's a billion people there that they can sell into. But guess what? When you go over there, what you have to do in order to get access to the market is surrender your technology. And you see General Electric, a mere shadow of its former self today. A lot of the problem with General Electric was they basically gave away a lot of their technology in order to gain access to the market in China. And what happens is, once China gets your technology, they turn it over to one of their companies that becomes a competitor, and they put you out of business. So forced technology in exchange for market access, that's second thing.
Hold on. We're on with Peter Navarro, Director of the White House Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy. Peter is the foremost expert serving the President of the United States on the issues of China. He's an assistant to the President, and he's talking to us right now on the Howie Carr Show about the 7 deadly sins that he calls that China is abusing the systems here in place and what we can do to combat those. You're on number 3. Go ahead, Peter.
Number 3 is the theft of intellectual property. This can be something as simple as ripping off a New Balance sneaker, where instead of it being a legitimate New Balance product, they basically copy it and then they sell it in the market with the New Balance name. But it also can be bigger kinds of pieces of technology. And a lot of the stuff they sell over the internet, it's estimated that as much as 40% of the products you buy through third-party marketplaces on the internet can actually be counterfeit. Right? So they make a ton of money. It's like hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. So that's number 3. Number 4 is what we call an economic dumping. It's basically dumping products below cost in a marketplace in order to push out American companies and take over the market. They do that. You have these state-owned enterprises, which is the 5th thing, which enjoys heavy subsidies.
Yep.
Right now, they're putting on a really big effort to take over our rail and rolling stock industry in this company, which would be devastating, but that's a key part of our critical infrastructure. The 6th thing they do, it's been a lot about in the news, currency manipulation. Why do they do that? What they do is they make their currency less in value. They undervalue their currency. What does that do? It makes it harder for us to sell exports to China. We buy more of their stuff. We get a higher trade deficit. They get the job. We get nothing.
But I thought the President just declared China through the Treasury Department a currency manipulator. Didn't they do that last week, or did I miss that?
You saw that, and as a short digression, that was the 7th of 7 promises that President Donald J. Trump made in June of 2016. I think you remember it well.
I do.
With the job plan speech in around Pittsburgh. It was one of the finest speeches ever given by a presidential candidate. And guess what? This president, promises made, promises kept, has kept all 7 of those promises related to the other ones were like getting out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership and renegotiating NAFTA. President Trump has branded China as crazy manipulated. Now what that does is it gives the Treasury Secretary the power to get him to stop. But that's going to take a while. And the last thing they're doing, which really is really important to New England, we're losing over 100 people a day, over 1,000 days a week, 1,000 people a week, and over 50,000 Americans a year to what? Made in China fentanyl and other opioids that they ship across the border into our country. And the sad and tragic and ironic part here is that many of the communities which have been devastated by the Chinese unfair trade practices, left with despair, have been more vulnerable to the opioid crisis. So, these are the 7 things that President Trump says, you're not doing that to this country anymore. And so, we've been in a long process of negotiation dating back to Mar-a-Lago in spring of 2017. And the president has been consistent, Corey. That's the thing. What? We're willing to talk to the Chinese, but when they fail to honor their commitments and act in good faith, tariffs come on.
So let's talk about the tariffs for a second, because I hear both sides of this all the time. I hear, the president decided to put a 10% tariff on about another $300 billion in goods coming in from China. All the news media says about these tariffs that they're a drag on the global economy and they drive the prices up and they're hurting the Americans. Tell us what the real truth is. Peter Navarro, Director of the White House Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, Assistant to the President.
The real truth is that China bears the entire burden of the tariffs, and they do it in a number of ways. First of all, in order for them to hang on to whatever market share they can, what they've been doing is they've been slashing their prices and also devaluing their currency. When we put the tariffs on at 10% on $200 billion, China proceeded to devalue its currency by 10%. So they were offsetting. Now, the good news is that we get the revenues from the tariffs, and the good news is that China also pays for this by losing their supply chain. This is the most interesting thing to me, Corey, is that China is seeing production move offshore out of China, back here to America or to other countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand. So when you hear people on TV or the radio saying somehow American consumers are paying the burden, it's usually those people who oppose the tariffs and want to offshore our jobs to begin with. It's just nonsense. We've seen absolutely zero inflation since the tariffs have been put on. All we've seen is more growth in this economy because we're defending ourselves against Chinese economic aggression. And so, my job at the White House, which is what you originally asked about, is like one of my jobs at the White House is to help think things through on all of this, help Ambassador Lighthizer and the President make sure the negotiations are moving forward, but as they move forward, we staunchly defend the American people against these 7 acts of aggression. And so that's where we are. And as I said earlier, this economy has been doing great. We've got fair trade now. We've got deregulation, cheap energy. We've got tax cuts which help stimulate investment, productivity, and higher wages. And if you look at the chessboard, you've got 6 million jobs created, 7 million people have been able to get off food stamps. We've got record low unemployment for blacks, Hispanics, women, the disabled, and veterans. Wages are rising, but disproportionately, Corey, I'm so proud of this as president, disproportionately wages are rising for blue-collar workers. And the other thing, Corey, you remember when Hillary went after the deplorables and whatever? Yeah, so what happened during the Obama-Biden years?
Hey, Peter. Peter, let me ask you.
Yeah,
I've got to take a short break. Can I bring you back on the other side of this break and we can finish this conversation? Because I think it's really important that we talk about it. We're on right now with the Director of White House Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, Peter Navarro, Assistant to the President. We're going to bring him right back after this break. I'm Corey Lewandowski in for Howie Carr.
This is Mark. in Williston, Vermont.
This is Marie in Somerville, Massachusetts.
This is Mike from South Attleboro, Mass., and this is the Howie Carr Show.
Welcome back to the Howie Carr Show. I'm Corey Lewandowski in for Howie Carr today. I want to remind you that Howie Carr is going to be on Tucker Carlson tonight, so tune in there, and I'll be on with Trish Regan on the Fox Business Channel. And now we're continuing our conversation with Peter Navarro, the Director of Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy at the White House. Peter, we've got about 2.5 minutes left. You were talking about what the previous administration had failed to do as it relates to China and what your role is to right that going in to make sure that American manufacturing is strong and vibrant like it used to be.
Right, Corey, and this is going to be the battle of our lifetime. We absolutely need to stand up to the Chinese. What's remarkable to me is that you have a Congress right now which can't agree on anything except this. We have really strong bipartisan support for the president's tough stance on China. There was a Harvard-Harris poll out recently that showed that a strong majority of American people support the tariffs because they understand what China is doing to us. And if I had any wish here about how this interview would end, is that everybody listening would remember those 7 acts of aggression that China continues to engage in, stealing of our intellectual property, the forced technology transfer, the cyber threats, the dumping, the state-owned enterprises, the currency manipulation, and most of all, the fentanyl. All of that's got to stop, and the President needs your support, he needs your help on this. This is something I think that we all can agree on, regardless of what your political party is, your ideology. And my job at the White House, Corey, is basically to create good-paying jobs for people who work with their hands in this country, and I'm so proud to be able to serve the President doing that.
Well, Peter, I want to thank you, and I know that our listeners want to thank you for the fight that you have every day. We're going to look back at this administration, and we're going to see the work that you and your team have done to stand fast and hold the line against China and the intellectual property, what they have done to our country. It's shameful, and for too long, Republicans and Democrats alike have said, hey, we're going to have free trade, and this president says it's going to be fair trade. And a big part of that is the fight against China. They're not the only ones, but they're the biggest perpetrator of the crimes against us and our citizens. And because of the work that you're doing, Peter, we are going to look back. Manufacturers coming back, jobs are coming back, and the people who work with their hands are going to thank you for the time and sacrifices that you made. Look, I told our listeners, you are a Harvard-educated PhD. You're one of the smartest people I've ever met in the White House. You are passionate. You are constantly considered the president's alter ego on this. And every time he has a question on China, he comes to you. I want to thank you for being on with us. Please keep up the great work that you do. It has been a privilege to host the Howie Carr Show once again today. Howie's going to be on Tucker tonight. I'll be on Trish Regan. I want to thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show. Tune back in tomorrow. Howie will be back. This is Corey Lewandowski signing off on the Howie Carr Show.